Imagine waking up in the morning. Your hand immediately reaches for your phone while your brain starts negotiating for a cup of coffee. Without it, you feel sluggish, irritable, as though an important piece of the day is missing. Today, we have coffee, cigarettes, alcohol, and countless other ways to make the brain feel better within minutes. But tens of thousands of years ago, humans had little more than caves, stone tools, and smoke from a fire. So what did they do when boredom set in? And did the first addiction begin with curiosity or with someone accidentally eating something that made them feel strangely different? To find the answer, we have to travel much farther back than the prehistoric world. Far enough that humans did not even exist yet. Our story begins millions of years ago in dense forests, where our primate ancestors spent nearly every waking moment searching for food and trying not to become food themselves. Our relationship with intoxicating and stimulating substances did not begin in a bar or a coffee shop. It began with something far more basic: survival. Ripe fruit fell to the forest floor, softened in the heat, and slowly began to ferment. Natural yeast consumed the sugar inside the fruit and produced alcohol. In other words, the first drunken experience on Earth may have started with a pile of fruit that had gone slightly past its prime. This process had already been occurring among flowering plants for tens of millions of years. More importantly, alcohol released a scent that could drift through the air like an invisible sign announcing, "There is sugar here and plenty of energy." Ancient apes quickly learned to follow that scent. Fermented fruit was not only tasty, it was also an easy source of calories. Even today, wild chimpanzees have been observed eating fermented fruit and drinking naturally alcoholic tree sap. They have even been seen crushing leaves into tiny sponges and using them to soak up the sweet liquid trapped inside tree hollows. Not bad for a species that never invented the cup. But here is the strange part. Why didn't they become so drunk that they turned into an easy meal for predators? The answer may lie in a genetic change that appeared around 10 million years ago. The common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees developed a version of an enzyme that could break down alcohol far more efficiently. This enzyme allowed the body to process ethanol roughly 40 times faster than the older version found in many other primates. Think about that for a second. While some animals might eat fermented fruit and begin stumbling around, our ancestors could keep feeding while remaining alert to danger. That ability became a genuine survival advantage. As our ancestors began spending more time on the ground, they could take advantage of ripe fruit that had fallen and started fermenting food that other animals might not have been able to consume safely. Researchers call this idea the drunken monkey hypothesis. It sounds like the title of a comedy, but it attempts to answer a serious question. Why are humans still so attracted to the smell and taste of fermented drinks? Perhaps some ancient part of the brain still remembers that the scent of alcohol once pointed toward a high-energy meal. But alcohol in fruit was only the beginning. The plant world contains an entire arsenal of chemical weapons. Because plants cannot run away, they produce toxins to discourage insects and leaf-eating animals. Among those defenses are nicotine in tobacco and caffeine in coffee plants. In theory, these chemicals should make animals stay away. But history has a habit of making things more complicated. At certain doses, the same defensive chemicals can make humans feel more alert and make them want to come back for more. Here is where things get truly strange. Some plant molecules can imitate or interfere with the natural chemical signals inside the brain. They act on the reward system, which evolved to encourage useful behaviors such as eating, socializing, and completing important tasks. The brain responds with feelings of pleasure, alertness, or excitement. The problem is that plants did not create these chemicals to help humans survive a long workday. They evolved as natural pesticides. But humans, as usual, saw the warning sign and wondered whether it could be turned into a drink. Over thousands of years of experimentation, our ancestors discovered that certain leaves, roots, and mushrooms could reduce pain, fight exhaustion, or produce unusual states of mind. They were not necessarily using these substances simply because they were bored. Many were treated as medicines, hunting aids, or bridges to the spiritual world. A leaf that allowed a hunter to travel farther might help save an entire group from starvation. But anything that helps the body push beyond its normal limits can also teach the brain to remember the experience and crave it again. So when did humans begin using tobacco? For years, no one had a clear answer. Then archaeologists excavated the ashes of an ancient fire pit in the Utah desert and discovered 4 charred seeds from a wild tobacco plant. They had been lying there for roughly 12,300 years. The discovery became the oldest known evidence that prehistoric humans had encountered and likely used tobacco. But wait. If tobacco was already being used during the Ice Age, how were our ancestors consuming it? And why did they seek it out thousands of years before they learned to farm? That means humans were already familiar with tobacco during the Ice Age, when hunters still followed mammoth tracks across frozen landscapes. Picture a small group huddled around a fire, warming their hands while chewing or burning branches of wild tobacco to fight exhaustion. If they carried entire flowering stalks back to camp, a few tiny seeds may have fallen into the flames and turned to charcoal. Thousands of years later, those scorched seeds would tell the story for them. Before we continue exploring the addictive substances of prehistory, you can also watch the video on this YouTube channel about how ancient humans survived the Ice Age. But here is the truly remarkable part. Humans were using tobacco long before they learned to plant grain or build permanent villages. In other words, stimulants came before agriculture. When nomadic groups entered unfamiliar territory, they quickly learned which plants were edible, which could ease pain, and which made the body feel unusually alert. They had no botanical guides or scientific textbooks. They relied on observation, memory, and, occasionally, experiments that must have gone very badly. Tobacco, however, was not the only mind-altering substance ancient people discovered. In a cave in Israel, archaeologists found traces of thick, fermented beer dating back roughly 13,000 years. People carved deep stone mortars directly into the cave floor, crushed wild grains, and allowed the mixture to ferment. What they produced probably resembled alcoholic porridge more than the cold beer served today. But it was not simply a drink. It appears to have been prepared for ceremonies honoring the dead and for gatherings that brought the community closer together. And that is only part of the story. At Göbekli Tepe in present-day Turkey, often described as one of the world's oldest monumental ritual sites, archaeologists discovered enormous stone vessels capable of holding around 160 liters of liquid. Chemical traces found on their surfaces may be connected to the processing or fermentation of grain. Imagine large groups hauling stones, raising pillars, and eventually gathering around vats filled with fermented drink. Building a temple by hand was difficult enough. Doing it as part of a feast may have made the work slightly more appealing. But why invest so much labor in making beer? Here is where things get interesting. Some archaeologists have suggested that the desire to hold feasts and maintain a reliable supply of fermented drinks may have helped encourage people to cultivate grain. Farming was exhausting, dependent on the weather, and required communities to remain in one place. But if grain could produce not only bread, but also beer for ceremonies and celebrations, the reward became much more tempting. The idea that beer came before bread remains debated, but it certainly makes the birth of agriculture sound like a party that lasted several thousand years. Now let us travel to China around 9,000 years ago. At the ancient settlement of Jiahu, people created a surprisingly sophisticated fermented drink. They combined rice, honey, wild grapes, and hawthorn fruit inside pottery jars, then allowed nature to handle the chemistry. The result was probably sweet, tart, and alcoholic all at once, something like an ancient cocktail, except without ice, straws, or a server asking whether anyone would like another round. But this drink was not made simply to quench thirst. The vessels often appeared in burials, suggesting that fermented beverages played an important role in ritual and spiritual belief. Ancient people may have believed that the warm, altered feeling produced by alcohol brought them closer to their ancestors or to the world beyond death. These drinks accompanied major moments in life, from communal celebrations to funerals. Alcohol did more than change the experience of one person. It became a kind of social glue for the entire group. Meanwhile, high in the mountains of South America, people discovered a different way to resist hunger and exhaustion. As early as 8,000 years ago, ancient communities were chewing coca leaves. But there was a problem. Chewing the leaves alone did not release their active compounds very efficiently. The plant seemed to have hidden its power behind a chemical lock. And somehow, without laboratories or modern chemistry, ancient people found the key. They chewed coca leaves with small amounts of alkaline material made from ash or processed minerals. The alkaline environment helped the body absorb the active compounds more effectively. This allowed people in the Andes to endure long journeys through high-altitude terrain, where the air was thin and food could be scarce. This was not simply a lucky accident. It reveals a long process of observation, experimentation, and chemical knowledge passed down through hundreds of generations. Then humans encountered something even stranger. Mushrooms growing in environments rich in decaying organic matter, sometimes near animal dung. On ancient rock walls in the Sahara, some images have been interpreted as showing human figures with mushroom-like forms or people participating in mushroom-related rituals. Some researchers have suggested that the artwork may be connected to psilocybin-containing mushrooms and altered states of consciousness. Ancient people may not have regarded these fungi as ordinary food. To them, they may have represented a doorway into an invisible world. And once a plant or fungus is seen as a gift from the gods, one question immediately follows. Who gets to control the doorway? For the Aztec and Maya peoples of Central America, hallucinogenic mushrooms were not something eaten casually for entertainment. They were regarded as the flesh of the gods and reserved for carefully prepared ceremonies. Participants consumed the mushrooms with honey, listened to the deep call of conch shell trumpets, and joined dances that could continue for hours. They believed the visions unfolding in their minds might contain warnings or glimpses of the future. To us, it may sound like a chaotic dream. To them, it was a sacred conversation. But wait, if you think ancient people only chewed leaves, ate mushrooms, or drank fermented beverages, the Maya may have taken things much further. Images on certain ceramic vessels appear to show members of the elite using special instruments to introduce fermented drinks or tobacco mixtures into the body through the rectum. It sounds almost like a shocking detail invented by a modern storyteller. Yet the archaeological images suggest that this practice may genuinely have formed part of ceremonial life. Biologically, this method could allow active compounds to enter the bloodstream more quickly while avoiding some of the breakdown that occurs in the stomach. The effects may therefore have arrived faster, more intensely, and with far less warning. That is also what made the practice so dangerous. Some researchers have proposed that it was used during public rituals and may even have involved people awaiting sacrifice, although its exact purpose remains debated. History often leaves us pictures. It rarely leaves an instruction manual. Leaving Central America behind, we traveled to Southeast Asia around 4,000 years ago. In Thailand, archaeologists discovered chemical traces of areca nut preserved in the dental plaque of ancient human remains. Areca nut can produce feelings of alertness, warmth, and increased energy, something like the prehistoric equivalent of caffeinated chewing gum. People may have chewed it while working, socializing, or taking part in community rituals. It was a small habit, but one strong enough to survive for thousands of years. Here is the strange part. Those ancient teeth did not show the obvious red or black staining often associated with later betel chewing traditions. Perhaps the people used areca nut in a different mixture, consumed smaller amounts, or followed an unusual method of cleaning their teeth. No one knows for certain. But modern plaque analysis has recovered a habit that might otherwise have disappeared completely, hidden inside deposits smaller than the head of a pin. Sometimes history is not buried beneath a palace. Sometimes it is stuck between two teeth. Now step into a deep cave in Bronze Age Spain. In the darkness, archaeologists discovered tubes made from bone, each containing locks of human hair dyed red. When scientists analyzed the roughly 3,000-year-old strands, they found traces of several compounds from highly toxic plants, including members of the nightshade family and club moss. The hair acted like a chemical diary, preserving evidence of substances the person had consumed during the months before death. This plant mixture could have produced powerful hallucinations, distorted sensations of the body, or the feeling that the mind had left the ordinary world behind. It is considered among the earliest direct evidence of hallucinogenic drug use in ancient Europe. But there was a serious problem. One mistake in preparation could have had devastating consequences. Whoever made the mixture probably needed detailed knowledge of plants, dosage, and ritual practice. In a community without doctors, the person who understood poisonous plants could appear to possess supernatural power. And this is the thread connecting all these stories. So-called magical plants were rarely available for anyone to use freely. They were often controlled by shamans, priests, or tribal leaders who decided who could take them, when they could be used, and under what ceremonial conditions. These rules may have reduced the danger, but they also transformed botanical knowledge into political authority. The person who controlled the doorway to the spirit world could also control those who wished to enter it. Leaders strengthened their position by claiming they could speak with ancestors, recognize omens, or receive messages from the world beyond. When an entire community watched them enter a trance and return with mysterious visions, their words became difficult to question. Mind-altering substances did more than change individual perception. They may also have influenced religion, law, and some of the earliest hierarchies in human society. Humans are strange that way. Something that begins with a single leaf can sometimes end with an entire system of power. After millions of years, that journey has not truly ended. The modern brain still carries ancient mechanisms that once helped our ancestors locate energy-rich food, resist exhaustion, and form strong social bonds. But today, we are no longer encountering the occasional fermented fruit or bitter leaf in the wilderness. We live surrounded by substances that have been refined, concentrated, and placed constantly within reach. The first addiction may have begun as a survival advantage. The modern challenge is learning not to let that ancient advantage take control of our lives.